I don't want to scare anyone, but I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason.
Golden Spiral Media presents the Friday the 13th rewatch.
Jason, Mother is talking to you.
Join Cory and Nathan each week as they slash their way through campgrounds, woods, Manhattan, hell, and space as they discuss another installment in the Friday the 13th franchise.
Hey, wasn't that the road up for Camp Crystal Lake back there?
Send us your feedback at goldenspiralmedia.com/feedback. Like our Facebook page at facebook.com/rewatch podcast. And follow us on Twitter at rewatchpod.
Legend has it that Jason came back to get even. Every now and then, the murders just start up.
Today we're discussing Friday the 13th, starring Betsy Palmer, Adrian King, Janine Taylor, Robbie Morgan, Kevin Bacon, Harry Crosby, Laurie Bartram, Mark Nelson, and Peter Brower, with Ari Lehman as Jason, directed by Sean S. Cunningham. Welcome back to the Rewatch podcast. I'm Cory, and you're heading to Camp Blood, ain't ya? It's got a death curse.
And I'm Nathan, and Jason was my son, and today is his birthday.
Indeed it is, Friday the 13th.
I was almost going to do the Crazy Ralph quote where he says, "You're doomed! You're all doomed!" You know what? I got both in, didn't I? How are you, mate?
I'm awesome, man. And look, here we are. We're on Golden Spiral Media.
What's going on? Has everyone missed us? It's been a while, hasn't it?
It's been way too long.
I know. I'm looking forward to getting acquainted with everyone again. So,
yes. I mean, we've been on GSM for a little while, I think. Tom and I have been continuing our TV discussions, but yes, me and you, we're here. We're getting back into some film and Friday the 13th, right here for Golden Spiral Media.
Yeah, Friday the 13th, man. Movies that I've never watched, so it's going to be a interesting journey for me. Let's just say that.
I'm really looking forward to it. I hope you enjoy some, and yeah, we'll see how the quality goes as we get through all 12 movies.
Oh, that's right. We suffered through all those Alien films, man, so we can get through these.
That's true. So before we get into it, I just wanted to remind everybody that indeed we are part of the Golden Spiral Media Podcast Network, and you can send us your feedback at goldenspiralmedia.com/feedback. You can type a message or use the SpeakPipe widget to record your own voice, so we can play it right back here on the show. You can even call 304-837-2278. And of course, head over to their Facebook, which is facebook.com/Golden Spiral Media, or follow on Twitter at GSM Podcasts. We thank them for hosting our show.
Yeah, get involved. It's always more fun when the audience kind of gets involved and gives a bit of feedback, and it gives us kind of something to bounce off, and it's also nice for us to kind of know that you're out there and you're listening. Yeah,
absolutely. There's got to be more Friday the 13th fans out there.
It's actually funny you say that, because today I was at a book sale in my my local kind of place, and they sell like a lot of DVDs. And there was one guy in particular that was scrounging, and I saw him in his hand. He had at least 8 or 9 Friday the 13th movies, and I thought about tapping him on the shoulder and say, "Dude, you should really listen to this podcast, man." I don't know how that would have went down though.
That's great. Yeah. Well, as we always do before we get into it, shall we check out the trailer?
Yeah, roll the projector.
Hello? Who's that? Oh, hi. What are you doing out in this mess?
1, 2, 3.
We weren't doing anything. We were just messing up.
4. 5. 6.
Must be my imagination.
Seven.
Can I help you? Hello?
8. 9. 10. 11. 12. Friday, the 13th. You may only see it once, but that will be enough. Friday, the 13th.
All right, welcome back. I think we should get into some trivia, Corey, about Friday the 13th. It was released on May 9th in 1980. It had a budget of $550,000 and it actually did exceptionally well, hence why they felt the need to make 12 of these suckers. The first film made $59.8 million worldwide. I think domestically in the States it made 39 million and then it went on to make another 19 million or 20 million all around the world. So this was a big hit. And keep in mind too, a little film called Halloween came out a few years before, which definitely kind of set the box office kind of scene as far as like horror films were concerned, and like small budgets making huge grosses. It certainly kind of set a bit of a platform. And as much as I like Friday the 13th, I kind of got the impression it was kind of walking in Halloween's kind of shadow slightly. Is that a fair comment, Corey?
Oh, definitely. It's like you said, it sort of became a platform for getting a hot cash injection into your studio, really. Halloween did so well at the box office that Paramount scrounged around, found this movie, put it out under their umbrella, and took that cash injection, and it still goes today. If you want some money brought into your studio, hell, make a cheap horror movie.
I know that there's a company around called Blumhouse Productions. I think there's a guy named Jason Blum. I can't recall exactly what his name is, but he's actually got a bit of a mantra that you can make pretty much any horror film you like, but it has to be made for $5 million or less. And a good portion of his movies all make 20, 25, 30, $35 million. And it just pays the bills, doesn't it? I mean,
it certainly does.
Especially in today's modern Hollywood kind of creative financing, accounting kind of methods that they have these days. To actually make a film for $5 to $10 million or $5 million, it's just, and then it goes on to make 30 million. It just makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. So Friday the 13th definitely paid out for Paramount as they went along. New Line became known as the house that Freddy built, going all the way into the 21st century, man. You look at Lionsgate, they were a small little indie production company that wanted to grow larger. So what did they do? They made 7 Saw films. 7.
I know. But you can't blame them because that has all made money. And people kind of think about Friday the 13th and maybe not laugh per se, but they kind of giggle a little bit with the amount of films that they made. But if you actually look at the box office, a good portion of them were all making money, and they were made for bugger all. Like, and I'm talking like, $1 million, $2 million budget kind of thing, and most of them go on to make at least $15 to $20 million. And as I said, it just makes sense, doesn't it?
Exactly right. So aside from that, let's get into some info about the making of this film. The movie was filmed at an actual campsite. It's Camp Nobi Bosco, which is in New Jersey, just as the movie is set. The camp is still in operation to this day, and it actually has a wall of Friday the 13th paraphernalia.
Oh my
in honor
God.
That the movie was set there.
I think it's hilarious, like that they've actually embraced the cult status that this kind of film presented to them, and the fact that it's still operating now. Excuse my ignorance, Corey. I'm going to ask you a question about the sequels that come up. But are all the films based at Camp Nobisoko or Bosco or whatever it is?
Well, I don't want to give too much away at the beginning, but I will just say that as much as Jason is tied to Camp Crystal Lake, let's just say that several of the upcoming films just are not set there. They're set nearby, but not set directly in the camp.
Actually, that's something I want to ask you before we get too far into the trivia. Like, obviously, you know my history of Friday the 13th and the fact that, truthfully, I've never really watched them, so this is all new to me. But you, it sounds like you're a bit of a fan, yeah? Like you've kind of, you know these films. You kind of grew up on these films. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I wasn't around for the big boom throughout the 80s. I was born in the mid 80s, but when Scream came out, that was my gateway into film, and I went back and watched everything.
Even like the super schlocky kind of 80s horrors ones?
Man, those are some of my favorites.
Nice. What else is there? Victor Miller, who was actually the screenwriter of this film, had actually originally given Jason the name of Josh, but after deciding that it sounded too nice, he actually changed it to Jason after a school bully. So there you go. Whilst most of the cast and crew stayed at local hotels during the filming, some of the loyal cast and crew members, including special effects makeup whiz Tom Savini, actually stayed at the actual campsite. They actually had Savini's Betamax VCR and only a couple of movies, Barbarella and Marathon Man, on videotape of all things to keep themselves entertained. So each night they would watch one of these movies. To this day, Tom Savini says that he can actually recite those movies by heart. I've got to admit to you, Corey, I've never seen Barbarella or Marathon Man. I bet you have, though.
I have not seen Marathon Man, but Barbarella is... Man, everybody has to see that movie.
I don't know. There's so many holes in my like film history of stuff like man, I've got to stop watching rubbish like Transformers and stuff and actually start watching some classics. Like, what's wrong with me? Seriously, I need to watch some classics, Corey.
Barbarella will give you a newfound respect for Austin Powers. That's all I'll say.
Oh, fantastic! All right, well, all right. What else is there, mate?
Well, on the topic of Tom Savini, I mean, he's of course, these days world-renowned for his makeup effects, especially in horror films. He was actually the first crew member on board for this film because the producers idolized his special effects makeup for Dawn of the Dead, 1978, wow. One of the all-time great zombie films.
Oh, totally. Fantastic. Sean S. Cunningham actually wanted to cast his son Noel Cunningham in the role of Jason, but his wife Susan Cunningham would not let him do this, and I can't lie, Corey, that would have probably been problematic, I suspect. I can't imagine Noel Cunningham growing up having a very nice kind of idea of Jason, but I'm glad they didn't do that because that would have been distasteful.
Well, as you heard me say in the opening intro, and I wanted to do this for every episode, is to directly credit who plays Jason in these films. Yeah. And Jason is in this movie. He's a little boy, and the guy's name is Ari Lehman, and to this day, Ari Lehman still lives off the success of playing the first Jason. Yeah, he makes appearances and everything at cons and whatnot.
Wow, there you go. I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, there's a bit of a worldwide kind of cult fandom attached to these films, so the fact that he can kind of make a living off it does not surprise me at all. And you know what, good luck to him. Does he actually appear in any of the subsequent films, or does the role of Jason always kind of shift?
It shifts, and when he becomes a bit more stabilized is when they start having a more reoccurring actor play the role.
Okay, interesting. All right, well, I look forward to kind of my Jason journey, as I might start calling it. Sean S. Cunningham has actually been quoted as saying that the type of actors that he sought for the film were intentionally meant to be like good-looking kids who you might see in a Pepsi commercial. And he's not wrong, is he? Like, it's like all of the camp counselors are model-esque teenage kind of kids, and they're all very attractive kind of people and whatnot. And I think they really did intentionally try to do that, didn't they?
Oh yeah, definitely. This movie is not by any means highbrow.
No.
You can go back and analyze it now, which people do. I certainly did when I was in film school. Like, I'm sure a lot of film school kids did.
Yeah, I know.
But, yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to it, let's say. I mean, the script was written in only 2 weeks by Victor Miller. And so it's funny, actually. Victor Miller never went to summer camp as a kid.
We were kind of talking about this before we started the show, because I think we both kind of agreed, and I'm not trying to kind of give anything away and to spoil all that, but our plot discussion, like, let's be truthful, Corey, there's not a whole lot of plot in this film. It's a pretty simplistic kind of setup. I mean, the main kind of plot is more to do with the history of what is actually happening, as opposed to getting to know these people. So I think it's not all that unsurprising to hear that Victor Miller actually only took 2 weeks to write this script, because it's more about the scenario and the history of the camp and the history of this murder that kind of took place, and it is about ever getting to know who Kevin Bacon's character is, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
So it's pretty good. Apparently Lou Reed, this is interesting, apparently Lou Reed played for free. Apparently he kind of hung around the set and actually just showed up kind of randomly, which is really strange, isn't it? That's such a strange bit of trivia.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, this was filmed at an actual camp, which was deep in the woods out in New Jersey. And Lou Reed actually had a place out there. And he caught wind that they were shooting a movie out there, came over to say hi, be a good neighbor, and did a bit of a free show for everyone there.
Wow, there you go. He's not the only famous person to kind of hang around set. One of the actors actually had a very famous dad. The guy that plays Bill is a guy named Harry Crosby, who was actually the son of the ginormous megastar Bing Crosby. So yeah, it's a pretty big connection. But apparently Harry was pretty keen not to use Bing's kind of star power to kind of gain him film roles. And it's actually kind of interesting, if you look at his filmography, he never really went on to do all that much. I mean, he did a few films, maybe like a handful, but he kind of stopped being an actor. I mean, the last film he did was in 1989, this thing called Hollow Venus, Diary of a Go-Go Dancer. So in fact, I think it's, apart from Kevin Bacon, none of these actors really went on to do all that much, did they?
No, not really.
I'm surprised though, because this is not a small film. I mean, a lot of people saw this. I mean, a lot of casting agents would have seen these actors. I'm surprised none of them, except Kevin Bacon, really went on to do anything.
Yeah, and you could look at the casting of Harry Crosby as maybe a vague attempt at sort of bringing some celebrity into there, just as Halloween did in the casting of Jamie Lee Curtis. Of course, had the famous mother, Janet Leigh, who was in Psycho. But really, what's the fame of Bing Crosby going to bring to a schlocky horror film?
Well, I suppose that, if anything, he's just trying to, make his own way, as an actor. But I can kind of understand him not wanting to use his dad's star power, but in some ways, maybe he should use it a little bit too. Like, I mean, it's an advantage that kind of other actors kind of don't really have, isn't it?
Exactly. I do love this little bit of trivia, though. Apparently, Gene Siskel of Siskel and Ebert fame hated this movie, and he hated it so much that he gave away the ending in a review, and he and Roger Ebert slammed it in a special edition of the Siskel and Ebert show.
Oh wow, there you go.
And they called it The War on Women, focusing on misogyny in slasher films. And apparently after this aired, ticket sales were boosted dramatically.
Wow. So even though their intention and purpose was to almost like discredit the film, they unintentionally promoted it, didn't they?
Exactly. And honestly, I don't know what they're talking about. I think this is a film that's very much about women and how strong women can be. We'll get into it, I'm sure.
Now, the actress that played Pamela was this woman named Betsy Palmer, and I think I read a bit of trivia that she was fairly uncomfortable with the role that she kind of took in Friday the 13th, and like she was quite a well-known actress that had been around for like decades, and done various kind of TV and kind of film, and was a fairly well-known kind of actress. But I think she fell on hard time, but for whatever reason. And she made Friday the 13th in 1980, and her previous screen credit was 1972. So it'd been a fair while between drinks. And as much as she might have been uncomfortable with the role of Mrs. Voorhees, it certainly did reignite her career, because she did go on to a reasonably successful like TV movie kind of thing. But does she show up again in any of the other films? I suppose we'll just have to find out, won't we?
Yeah, I guess we will find out. But yeah, she is quoted as saying that she literally did this movie because she needed a new car.
Oh,
and they were going to pay her enough so she could go ahead and buy said car. But apparently after she read the script for this film, she called it a piece of shit and then signed up to do it. So,
well, there you go.
If that's anything to go by, she probably didn't think that it was going to go on to anything special. It's a cheap slasher film, but this is 1980. This is where the boom is happening, and yeah, she probably didn't think many people would see it. In her later years, she came around to it. She too would show up at cons and stuff. She was, later in life, she was like, maybe I should embrace this.
And so she did kind of get into it. And, the idea of her thinking that maybe no one would see this film, she was totally wrong, wasn't she? I mean, this is the kind of when a lot of people saw this film, and she's quite memorable. Let's just put it like that. Obviously, we'll get into it as we kind of discuss the film, but she shows up at a certain point in the film, and she makes a fairly large imprint, doesn't she?
She really does.
Yeah.
She's a method actress too, apparently.
Is she?
Yeah, she apparently gave the character this very detailed backstory.
Oh, yeah.
She imagined that Mrs. Voorhees hated sexual transgression because she had Jason out of wedlock with a high school boyfriend, and her parents ultimately disowned her for her sins because that isn't something that good girls do, quote unquote. So she had like this whole setup. She knew the character backwards and forwards, and again, we'll get into it, but yeah, she shines bright in this movie.
Yeah, well, apparently Cunningham wanted to make the Mrs. Voorhees character terrifying, and he apparently actually believed that it was important that Betsy Palmer to not act over the top, because she wanted to kind of people to kind of believe it. And I think she does kind of achieve that. Like, she kind of shows up and she's this strange kind of energy, and thinking like, who is this woman? And then you kind of learn who she is, and then you really learn who she is, and then it kind of goes to the next level. But it's a pretty interesting casting, and I think she does a pretty good job.
Yeah, and talking of people who maybe couldn't see past the cheapness of it all, even the director, Sean S. Cunningham, he flat out refused to come back and direct a sequel to this.
Yeah.
He just didn't want to do it because it's not much of a spoiler these days, but they're going to bring Jason into it after this film.
Yeah.
And he thought that, Jason coming back from the dead as a storyline is just stupid. And he just thought, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to get involved. If you've got the rights to the films, make whatever sequels you want. I'm not going to be involved in it. And of course, these days, Jason Voorhees is an icon of horror films.
I think I read somewhere in my research for this film that apparently Sean Cunningham does regret not coming back for the sequel, even though he kind of didn't really like the way the storyline was kind of progressing. I think he probably would have liked to have had a little bit more control than perhaps he did. And I mean, but you know what, like he did go on to a reasonably kind of successful, not many big films after Friday the 13th. I mean, he made a film called A Stranger Is Watching in 1982. He did a comedy called Spring Break in 1983, and then he made maybe like a handful more films, like directing, right up until this day. He's still alive, and he has produced a lot of films as well, but none of them have been like ginormous kind of successes. Like, have you seen any of those films, Cory?
No, I haven't, but spoiler alert for the future. As much as he did not want to come back for a direct sequel, he is going to make another appearance as director in this series, but it's going to be a while.
Okay, all right, nice.
We'll get back to him.
We will, which I look forward to. So do you want to get into the film now?
Yeah, sure. Let's get into it.
All right.
So, as we were saying, not much in the way of plot here. It's pretty straightforward. And if you're going to come into these films, really you come into it for the kills, right?
Yeah.
So Nathan and I, we both have up in front of us a list of all the kills that happen in this movie and the method of how these kills happen.
Yeah.
But I think, we still need to give context. So let's go through the film, but
we will,
I think as we get to the kills, I think that's probably where we should focus our discussion, right?
Yeah, so the film essentially focuses, it starts in the summer of 1958, and we're introduced to a camp called Camp Crystal Lake, and it's kind of like a fun kind of place to be, and there's like a good vibe kind of in the air, and there's these two camp counselors who are apparently named Barry and Claudette. I could not tell you that, Corey, for the life of me.
I'm not sure that's actually in the film. That may be like
it might be in the script. Who knows?
In retrospect, people gave them names.
So apparently they sneak away from a campfire and into a storage barn, and they, of course, being teenagers and kind of hot and bothered, they prepare to have sex like as quickly as they can. And whilst they're kind of getting involved, in the whole act, there is clearly somebody else kind of there, and the camera actually I actually find this film kind of interesting the way it perpetuates who the assailant is. It never really shows you who the assailant is, but the camera takes the perspective of looking at what where the assailant is standing from. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. We're looking at the point of view of the killer.
Yeah.
So, and that's the interesting thing about this film, is that it's a whodunit.
Oh, of course it is. It's a total whodunit, and it's a mystery. It's Columbo wrapped up in a in a camp kind of teenage romp with Kevin Bacon, but that's okay. So anyway, we get back to these counselors, Barry and Claudette, and they're having sex in the storage barn, and this assailant is kind of staring at them, and it's kind of down on the ground floor. Then it kind of makes its way up the stairs, and it's kind of peering at them, and then they realize that there's somebody there. Now, the thing that I find interesting is they don't really freak out, do they? They clearly recognize this person, don't they?
Yeah. It's the great thing. It happens again later as well, where somebody sees the killer but doesn't react with fear at all. They just say, "Oh yeah, hey, we weren't doing anything. We're just having a bit of fun here." And then the next thing, they're being stabbed to death. Yeah,
I know, and it's just like this horrific kind of scene, and it's quite dramatic, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually really enjoy this scene, as much as it is about two teenagers getting killed. It's suspenseful, just these people caught off guard, and suddenly, he was stabbed in the stomach, I think, and then Claudette actually had her throat slashed, and it puts you in the killer's shoes. It's
totally
almost like a vicarious thrill in a way, right?
Well, I mean, that's the whole idea. It's all about kind of creating that tension, and I did find it really interesting, the idea of having the camera from the point of view of the killer. It kind of created this really unnerving, almost like a peeping Tom kind of perspective that did make you feel uncomfortable, because you knew as a viewer that you shouldn't be looking at this, you shouldn't be watching this, but you're in the eyes of the murderer, the assailant, Jason, whatever you want to call him. Or is he Jason? Who knows? We'll get to that as we kind of start talking. Yeah, I did kind of find it interesting the way they did this. But after these two teenagers, camp counselors Barry and Claudette, get murdered by this unseen assailant, we then flick to 21 years later, and we then meet a newly hired, well, they call her a counsellor, Annie Phillips, but she does say that she's the cook. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly right. She is hitchhiking her way to the camp, and she kind of stops in the nearby town, and everybody gives her bug eyes when she mentions like where she's going. And it's quite an interesting scene, because you kind of learn about what is going on over at that camp through the eyes of the people who live nearby, and it's really brought out and vocalized by a guy they call Crazy Ralph.
Yeah, that's right. Hence my opening line of "You're doomed, you're doomed," that kind of stuff. Yeah.
But pretty much all the locals think the way that Crazy Ralph thinks. They just don't vocalize it in such a crazy drunk way.
Yeah, that's right.
A little boy drowned out there. 2 camp counselors were murdered. Don't go out there.
Yeah,
the place should be shut down and condemned, and nobody should ever go there again. But the family who owns it, the Christie family, are reopening it.
Yeah, they decided to like revive it kind of somehow with this new batch of counsellors. And so we essentially get Annie Phillips, you know, meeting all these people in the diner, trying to like veer her away from like going to this camp, but she doesn't really believe it. She's like, really, like, you know, that happened like 20 years ago. Who cares? Like, it's in the past. Let's kind of like move on. And you know, I've got a job and I need to get there. You know, so somehow I think the waitress persuades a very friendly truck driver named Enos to drive Annie halfway towards the camp. And as you say, it was during that actual drive that Enos tells Annie about the young boy that drowned at Crystal Lake in '57 and about the two murders that the following year. After that happens, we then switch back to the camp and we actually meet all our counsellors. So there's how many? There's 6 of them at this stage, or 7. Ned, Jack, Bill, Marcy, Brenda, and Alice. And there's also the owner, Steve Christie, and they've gone to great efforts to refurbish the cabins and the facilities, and that they're expecting, you know, 80 to 90 kids anytime now, and they're trying to get like the archery range up and running, and you know, all the facilities need to be kind of tip top and ready to go because all the campers are about to arrive. And you, like, as much as these guys are counsellors and it's like their summer job, you get the impression that, I mean, they're all teenage kids, aren't they? I mean, as much as it's a job, they're also there to have fun too, and like they're swimming, you know, they're doing all kinds of things. There's clearly like a few couples there as well, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
The weird thing is that Alice has been there with Steve, like fixing the place up and stuff, and then the rest of them arrive, so all of them are friends, but nobody knows Alice. So she's actually, I don't know, she's like putting up like the guttering or something.
Yes,
thing.
Yes,
and Steve starts like marveling at her ability to draw, and she wants to go back to California because she says she's got something to deal with out there. And Steve's like, nah, stick around, come on, and, you know, I really need your help, you're doing a great job. And he becomes like a sleaze, like really quickly.
Oh,
he just
totally.
starts hitting on her, and he's touching her hair, and you can tell she's uncomfortable, but she agrees to stick around and help out, get the camp back into shape.
But they keep waiting for Annie to show up, and they're suddenly starting to get a bit concerned. And Steve is like, "Has Annie showed up yet? We're waiting for her, and as soon as she shows up, we need her to get to work straight away. And in the meantime, we've all got to pick up the slack and make sure this place is ready to go." And he's very much the boss, isn't he? But you're right, he is bordering on being slightly sleazy and kind of a bit inappropriate. It's certainly, you know, late 70s, early 80s kind of filmmaking where these kind of social kind of norms, for whatever reason, hadn't really kind of been put in yet, have they?
Exactly. But it's a great setup, I think, you know, just the fact that everybody else has arrived because they all know each other. Annie's running a bit late because she's hitchhiking her way over. She doesn't even drive. So that kind of puts her in this isolated state, you know. She got driven that halfway over, but she's still got to walk 10 miles to the camp. And they try to do this, it's like a bait and switch, really, because Steve takes off. He's like, I'm going to go and grab lunch at the diner, so you kids keep working.
30 miles away. He goes and grabs
No, right.
lunch at the diner.
But he's driving a green Jeep
Yeah.
with the top down. And then the next time we see Annie, this green Jeep comes along and picks her up. You know, the top's up this time, so you can't see who's driving. But they try to make you think it's Steve who's killing everybody.
She jumps in the car and, yeah, let's just say that there's trouble there, isn't there?
And that's when we get into, I guess, the first kill of this grouping of kills, if you will. Annie realizes that they missed the turnoff up to Camp Crystal Lake.
Let's just make it clear, like, you know, according to my list, this is kill number 3 in Friday the 13th, after our good friends Barry and Claudette passed away, you know, 20 years earlier.
Exactly. But Alice is onto it, you know, as soon as they missed that turn off, and she's like, hey, you know, I think we're supposed to turn. Can we stop the car? And yeah, the fear sets in with her immediately. She actually jumps out of the car.
She jumps out, I know, which I was kind of surprised at. And yeah, she threw herself out of the car, and then the Jeep stops immediately, backs up. Annie runs away into the woods, and the killer kind of catches up to Annie, and sure enough, sliced to the neck. And that was the first time I shrieked like a girl when I watch this film, Corey. Okay, that's shriek number one. Okay.
What'd you think of Tom Savini's effects here with that throat slit?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, they were very effective because it really made me nervous every time I was watching it. Like I realize it's fun, Corey, but it just doesn't sit well with me. I watch these things and there's a part of me that's kind of just like relatively uncomfortable whilst I'm watching them because I wouldn't necessarily call myself a natural horror guy. It's never been my genre that I've like gravitated towards. So the whole blood and guts thing, like all the kills and stuff, is something that, you know what, man, we've got 12 of these films to get through. I've just got to put it behind me and just move on. You know what? I think from the perspective I'm taking is I just want to have a bit of fun. They're just fun films, yeah.
Yeah, right on. I do have to say though that we're watching this, so many years removed now, and we're watching pristine copies of it, even, just watching it on DVD, it's been nicely cleaned up and everything like that. I think the skin tones around the neck area, I mean, you can tell the difference between the face and the neck, so it kind of takes away that, that realism of it, if you will. You can kind of tell that there's a prosthetic applied there, so the blood spews out of the neck and stuff like that.
You know what though, man? You still believe it though.
Like, yeah, exactly. It still looks good for what it is.
Oh man, it looks great for what it is. And like the cold hard reality is this film was made for $500,000 and it went on to make 60 million worldwide. And like, that's not an accident, Corey. That's relatively confident filmmaking with some very confident special effects that gives people a thrill when they're watching it. And you have to take your hat off to Tom Savini and his special effects crew because they really knew what they were doing. And there's something to be said about stuff that is happening in camera, on set, on screen. You can feel it. You could argue that modern kind of films these days with all the CGI effects do not have the same kind of weight to them than a badly placed, knife around the throat slitting, that kind of, you know what I mean? That kind of effect. Like, it's just as effective doing that as it is spending all this money on CGI. And for whatever reason, because it's in camera, it's kind of happening. It's kind of like the way you think about it in your mind is more effective. I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
Well, I'm right there with you. I think with these kind of films, these slasher films, the more you can get in camera, the better. Don't go for those cheap, cheesy effects because that looks even more fake.
Oh, totally. And no, you're dead right. So I always appreciate when films and filmmakers go to the effort of trying to do stuff like live and kind of happening. I think there's an element of weight to the consequence and the scenario that they kind of present to you. Yeah, I always quite like it. So anyway, we should keep moving on.
Yeah, so we may as well just get to the next kill, really, which is Ned.
Yeah.
His actually happens off camera, but he is set up during this period as being like the prankster or the jokester or something like that, right? He goes out on the archery range and shoots an arrow into the thing, and
that's right. And the woman gets cranky. Apparently, that was Tom Savini who did that arrow off screen as well. It wasn't Ned at all.
Yeah, trying to think of what her name was. Brenda, maybe? Was it Brenda? Yeah.
Take a pick, man. It could be any of them. It's not like the film gets to know any of these characters.
That's true. He also pretends to drown at one point. So I think what they're doing there is that, since he's the next one to die, nobody's going to miss him, right? They just figure he's off doing something, being stupid. So even though he gets killed off screen, I still think it's a cool bit of suspense because he sees the killer.
Yeah.
Up in one of the cabins and follows the person in and is like, hey, what's going on or something. And then the next thing he's dead.
I think the next kill kind of made me feel very unsettled is Jack, who's the Kevin Bacon character, who's getting busy with, his girl Marcy. And they're like getting busy, in bed, they're kind of doing it, and they don't kind of realize that there's bunks. Well, there are bunks in the bed, but they do like a long shot where the camera kind of moves up as Jack and Marcy are doing their thing, and you see there's a body. Is that Ned's body up the top there? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that made me feel very unsettled. And then I thought something terrible was about to happen. And I kept kind of gritting my teeth, kind of waiting for it to occur.
I know. But at the same time, I'm always like, you didn't realize there was somebody up there?
Yeah, I know.
Like, I know he's dead and everything, but
they didn't
look
look very hard, did they? Exactly.
No, she just goes in there, takes her clothes off, and presents herself to get burned by Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So they do their business. They finish with each other. Marcy goes to do something, or I can't recall.
Yeah, she goes to the bathroom.
To the bathroom, and Jack is kind of lying there with his shirt off. And I'm pretty sure Kevin Bacon was working out quite heavily prior to this movie. This was this one of his first roles?
Yeah, it is. He doesn't even say very much in this movie.
Is it actually his first role?
I think it is. I think it actually is his first role.
Wow, that's really...
He may have done some TV or something beforehand, but this is like his first like on-screen movie performance.
Okay, well, I'm just having a look at him now. Yeah, you're right. Like, he did a few kind of maybe a movie. He was in Animal House in 1978.
Ah, right.
Which I forgot about. He was in that now that I think about it. And then he did, Friday the 13th in 1980, and obviously he went on to appear in absolutely everything for the next 30 years. So he's kind of one of those interesting kind of actors. But so we get Jack, and he gets an arrow pierced from underneath the bed. I know, brutal, yeah?
It's probably one of the better kills in this movie, actually. Just him laying there, and then bang, the hand comes up, holds his head down, spears him through the neck.
Which is this is the fifth kill in a series of 10, might I add. Now, we also get, Marcy, who is stumbling around. Does she realise that Jack is dead during this period? I can't remember.
No, she's kind of in there, and she hears them, clamoring about, 3-4 times. And every time she's like, hey, Jack, or, hey, guys, is that you or something? Doesn't find anybody, and then shrugs it off. 4 times that happens in this sequence.
Wow.
She's too busy doing Katharine Hepburn impressions in the mirror for some reason.
And then she gets a axe slammed into her face. And let me just say, Cory, that's shriek number 2 for me in this film. Okay.
Great staging on that too.
Oh,
She's
my God.
looking in the showers there, and the use of shadow as the axe comes up behind her. I love that.
Yeah.
So suspenseful.
It is really suspenseful. And has the storm started outside yet? Because isn't this when there's a storm? There's they're essentially kind of rained in, aren't they?
Yeah, I think by the time the sun goes down, it's just chucking down.
I actually think they do a pretty good job in this film of creating that suspense and actually giving you that kind of it's like this a crazy night where communication's hard with each other, and the rain effects work really well. Yeah,
it's like the storm has arrived, if you will. Trying to be metaphorical about it.
Yeah. Have we talked about the strip poker, whatever it is that they play at one stage?
Yeah, so that's pretty much what breaks out at this point. So Marcy and Jack are both dead, as is Ned, sitting up in his top bunk. And the rest of them decide they're going to play Strip Monopoly.
Yeah, that's it, Strip Monopoly, that's the one. Yeah.
So they're doing that. And then we cut back to Steve. Because this whole time they've led us to believe that Steve is the killer with his green Jeep. Yeah. But no, he's still at the diner for some reason.
For some reason, hours later.
He was going for lunch. It's now well into the night.
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock at night or something.
He just stayed there. He had lunch, he had dinner, he hung out, talked to the waitress.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows what he's doing, Doesn't he have to hitch? No, that's right. He drives back and his car breaks down, doesn't it?
Yeah. And the police just happen upon him and give him a ride back.
And doesn't the policeman kind of give this big spiel about when a full moon happens, all the statistics go up for rapes and robberies and all this kind of stuff,
Again, coincidentally, the police officer doesn't make it all the way back to the camp because he gets a call to go out somewhere. So he has to drop Steve off, just a little bit outside of the camp.
Yeah.
Steve's the next to get it.
And that's another kind of example of when somebody else gets it, they clearly see the assailant, the killer, and they don't act with any level of, what are you doing here? Like, who are you kind of thing. Like, they know who this person is, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. He walks up, there's a torch being put in his face, and he goes, oh.
What are you doing
What are you
here?
doing out here in this muck? And he's not surprised. Like, well, I guess there's a bit of surprise, but he's not like, hey, who the hell are you? Get out of here. It's just, hey, what are you doing here? Bang. And you're dead.
Yeah, so you're right. So we get Steve Christie, who's our 7th kill, and he's knifed in the stomach and chest, just as he kind of gets back to camp. The 8th kill is Brenda Jones, who is one of our strip Monopoly girls, who goes to investigate the lights coming on in the Arrow range or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, and she also hears, like, somebody yelling for help.
Yes, that's right. She does too.
Yeah, whoever our killer is, they do a really good impersonation of what sounds like maybe a child or something yelling for help. But yeah, she's lured out to the archery range where she's killed.
Straight away, I know. So that only leaves 2 of our counsellors left, Bill and Alice. Adrian King and, what's his name? Crosby, Harry Crosby is still kind of around. So those guys have done well to kind of last this long. We're like an hour and a quarter into the film by this stage, aren't we?
Well, they haven't really done anything to stay alive other than stay inside.
Essentially. But, I mean, I can't lie, man. Like, the film did have this fairly decent level of suspense. Like, for borderline the whole film, like... Yeah, I did enjoy that aspect, even though it kind of made me feel uncomfortable. It was quite effective with its filmmaking technique of, who is this kind of murderer and kind of the whole suspense about who's going to get killed next, and more importantly, how they're going to get killed next.
And you're right, it all seems to make sense as well, even though at this point there have been 6 kills, for this grouping. So of, the 8 people who are there, 6 of them are now dead, and it's only now that both Alice and Bill actually start investigating, like, what's going on, like, where is everybody? Maybe we should call somebody.
I know.
That's a lot of dead people before we get to this point. And it really makes me laugh, actually, because they go over to make a phone call, to call the police. And fair enough, the phone line has been cut there. But Alice goes, oh, should we use the payphone, maybe?
A dime.
Do you have a dime or a quarter? And he goes, no. I'm like, so the only reason you didn't make the phone call using the payphone is that you didn't have a dime or quarter. I mean,
find one. Yeah, exactly. Make that bloody
There's got to be one around there somewhere.
I know, it's just crazy. So the final kind of kill before we get to the last counselor is Bill. Bill kind of, how does he get it again? He gets like pinned somehow with arrows to the something, doesn't he? Is that right?
Again, I think it's off screen, but Alice stumbles upon him later on.
Throat slit with hunting knife, pinned to door with arrows through the arms or the chest or something like that, yeah?
Exactly. And this brings us to our last girl, Alice.
And then the infamous green Jeep shows up, doesn't it?
As far as people bring up that, these horror movies, the last girl, she's always doing stupid things like running up the stairs or whatever. I think Alice does a pretty good job. Like, once she finds Bill hanging from the wall there, like, she goes into a cabin and she fortifies that place.
She finds a weapon.
Yeah, she's tying ropes up so the door can't be opened. She's slamming everything up against it. She arms herself. Yeah, she's into it.
But we meet this middle-aged woman who shows up in the green van, and she's identified to be this woman named Pamela Voorhees, who says she's actually an old friend of Steve's. Alice kind of instantly kind of sympathizes with Pamela a little bit, and her natural instinct is to, I need help, can you help me? And Pamela's actually quite warm towards Alice at first. It's like, oh, let's get you inside, dear, and let's find some help and show me what's going on and all this kind of stuff. And she kind of comes in and she's got this really odd kind of energy, but she's strangely warm towards Alice, and then starts revealing to Alice that her son Jason was actually the boy who was actually drowned in 1957. And she actually blames his death on a pair of counselors who are actually having sex instead of watching her son Jason. So all this could have been avoided by the counselors just being slightly responsible and actually watching her son. And instead of being responsible, the son passed away, or so we think he passed away. She's pissed about it, and you could kind of tell she's kind of got a bit of a personality disorder, doesn't she? Like, she kind of flicks between, she's like talking to herself, but she kind of pretends that she's talking to Jason. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, Jason's voice comes out, and that's the cool part of it too, when she's doing the killer mommy, I will, Jason. And it's like you said, it's a strange energy that comes from her. At the beginning, she's so like motherly, she's this nice older woman. And the next thing, she is a formidable enemy who is going to come and kill you.
But it's kind of interesting though, because from an audience perspective, we know she's trouble because we recognize that Jeep, but Alice doesn't recognize that Jeep. The Jeep just shows up, and she thinks it's Steve. She thinks it's Steve, doesn't she? Yeah, exactly.
That's why she comes out. At the same time, do you think this is a little bit of a cheat? For a movie that's a whodunit, they never gave us the chance to guess that maybe it was Pamela Voorhees. She's not introduced until this point.
Well, she's not introduced to this point, and I think, if anything, it kind of confuses who actually was doing all these killings.
Like, if she was in the diner at the beginning, or, even just a drop line, like when Steve was at the diner, Pamela used to be the cook at the camp. Maybe she's the cook at the diner now, and he could have said something like, hey, is Pamela working the kitchen today? No, she's got the day off. Oh, okay, there you go.
Something, yeah. It was something like to connect it. But I also kind of get the impression too that Pamela's perhaps maybe the town kind of pariah as well. Like, she's probably got a bit of a sordid history that she probably doesn't really like talking about. And I suspect that those townsfolk in that cafe know a lot more than they're kind of letting on.
Possibly.
Yeah. I mean, I could be wrong, but I suspect there's kind of some crazy stuff's occurred in that town in the last 20 years that probably no one is talking about, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Possibly, anyway.
And that's our big showdown, is that Pamela just, she goes crazy on Alice. And, we get the whole backstory. And Alice puts up a pretty good fight against her, She's knocking her down, knocking her out. She gets a good couple of head whacks in at one point. The whole thing with Pamela, slapping her about as well. Like, she gets her at one point, she just smacks her about. Man, it's a full-on fight.
Alice doesn't really finish off the job though. She keeps hitting her with a frying pan or something like that, and forcing kind of Pamela on the floor, and then she'll see a little bit of blood trickle out from her head. So she thinks that she's passed out or killed or whatever it might be, but she doesn't really finish it off, and that's kind of Alice's mistake. She needed to finish it off, and you know what? She does, doesn't she?
She thinks she's done it. She's out by the water. Pamela comes back in. They fight. Alice gets her hands on a machete and decapitates her.
I know, and it's pretty intense imagery on the screen too when that actually happens. The filmmakers take great delight in showing this decapitation, don't they?
Yeah, they cut back and forward to it in slow motion 3 times.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Headless corpse falls to the ground, spewing blood out of it. It's great.
Yeah, it's good fun. And then we get to a confusing end. Do you think the end is confusing, or did you?
Yeah.
It's kind of it's a little problematic. And you I kind of felt like the final couple of minutes of this film, literally the last 2 minutes of this film, was a bit tagged on. And maybe I'm not too sure how I felt about it. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really make sense, right? She pushes herself out into the water on a canoe after killing Pamela, and the police show up, and they're calling to her. And then the decomposing body of the little boy Jason jumps out of the water and drags her down.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know. They kind of play it off like it might have been a dream, because she wakes up in the hospital and they're like, hey, we dragged you out of the water. What's going on?
Did that happen? Didn't that? Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, and she's totally convinced that there was someone there. So was it a dream? Did she imagine it? She might have imagined it, but it could have happened, I suppose. But then again, the two police officers don't say that they saw her being dragged by anyone, do they? But in her mind, she's convinced she was dragged by someone. I mean, why is Jason still alive? Is he supernatural? Is he a ghost? Is he a demon from hell? Like, who knows? It's a big fat question mark, isn't it?
I know. Maybe we'll find out in part 2.
Maybe we'll find out in part 2, and that's kind of where we end the film, because you're right. Like, when they ask about Jason, the officer says that there was no sign of any boy, and the last line of the film is Alice looking to the policeman and says the words, "Then he's still there." Shock, horror, dismay, and there we are, and then we're at the end of our film, Friday the 13th.
So, ratings, recommend?
Yeah, this is a hard one for me. You know what, man? If you're a horror fan, this is definitely a recommend. For someone like myself who doesn't, it's not their natural fit. Don't know if I would recommend it. Like, I don't think it's the greatest film in the world. I think there's some tropes in there that are kind of fun. It certainly set up a franchise that kind of went on and on and on for like decades. And from a horror perspective, it's an important film, you know, because it's certainly in that kind of, you know, early 70s to kind of, you know, mid 80s kind of period where like the whole slasher film thing was kind of, you know, starting to kind of take prominence with, you know, Halloween and, you know, Black Christmas and Last House on the Left, and all those kind of films kind of came to fruition, and this was kind of amongst that lineage of kind of films. So from that perspective, it's an important film. But is it a great film? I'm not convinced about that. I think it's a fun film, but I'm not convinced it's a great film. If I had to give it a score, I'd probably float around the 6.5 Alice's out of 10. That's where I'm kind of at with this. What about you?
Well, you know, I kind of have the same points that you do. I think this is an important film for the era that it came from. As much as it tagged on to what Halloween did, I think it still has its own merits, and I do think it's a lot of fun. I think the kills are very imaginative, and I think Tom Savini brings that to life. Is there a lot of plot going on? No, there's not. But it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
I like it, and I like the mystery.
Yeah.
You know, this is very different from all the Friday the 13th films. In retrospect, you haven't seen them, so you don't quite know. But this is like the whodunit and stuff like that. And yes, they cheated at the end, having not introduced who the killer was to us previously. But, you know, as far as it goes, I really like this film. So I'm going to give it 8 machetes out of 10.
Good. Yeah, you know what? You know, next week we'll be kind of getting into Friday the 13th, part 2, which I think they made fairly quickly. I think it came out the following year, didn't it?
It did indeed.
Yeah, so nice.
So, long-time listeners may have noticed we didn't play any clips during our discussion. We are changing up the format a little bit, and we are actually going to have a clips section here at the end.
Nice.
So we've got some clips lined up, and we can play them back and laugh at them or comment on them or whatever we think about it. So shall we play some clips?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the first clip here I've titled Not Doing Anything.
We weren't doing anything. We were just messing
So that was our first set of kills.
It's so silly, isn't it?
But it's a lot of fun.
It is.
Hey, we weren't doing anything.
I know, it's crazy.
We got a little bit of Crazy Ralph.
Yeah, let's do
Good
it.
camp blood, ain't you? God damn it, Ralph, get out of here. Go on, get. Leave people alone. You'll never come back again. Oh, shut up, Ralph. It's got a death curse.
I'm surprised a filmmaker hasn't picked up the concept of making like a Crazy Ralph, you know, prequel, like made in like the 50s or something like that, you know, with really going back into the lore of Friday the 13th. I reckon there's kind of definitely some kind of hardy territory there.
As much as I love Crazy Ralph too, I do love the reaction of the truck driver. Oh, God damn it, Ralph. Get out of here.
It's quite good, isn't it? All right, well, what's the last one?
I've got a whole bunch of them.
Oh, do you? Oh, geez. Well, there you go. I thought there was only 3.
So we've got this one I've called Little Goats.
Guess I always wanted to work with children. I hate when people call them kids. Sounds like little goats. But when you've had a dream as long as I have, you'll do anything.
I just thought that was weird. Kids. And I hate when people call them kids.
Just strange. The whole little goats thing, that's weird too.
It's so bizarre, right?
I know.
I took a little snippet of the music, right,
Yeah, nice.
that they used during the kills.
Oh my lord. That's actually something I forgot to mention, is the music. It's so dramatic all the time.
Well, I've titled this one Psycho Riff.
Okay, all right, do it.
Because it is like it's a rip-off of Psycho's music.
Yeah.
Have a listen.
All right.
Isn't that just Psycho?
It's just so psycho, but it's just so like there's zero subtlety about the composition. Like, I would have loved to have been in those compositional sessions when they were like looking at the film and trying to work out what the best kind of musical take to do, and that's what they came up with. And it's great. To be fair though, like the music was effective.
Yeah, it is. The use of strings for kills and boosting the suspense. It's what it's designed to do, and it does its job. We said Kevin Bacon didn't actually really say a lot in this film, but I did capture one line.
It's gonna storm. You can tear down that valley like a son of a gun.
I don't know why. I just thought that was. I was like, I think that's the only thing Kevin Bacon actually says throughout the whole movie. How about a game of strip Monopoly?
Hi, 8. 4th Avenue. You owe me one boot.
Tell me. Alice draws first blood. It's a terrible way to talk about my feet.
Did you say a terrible way to talk about my feet? Oh, isn't that just that's such a like an American kind of college kid trope, the concept of like playing strip poker, or I mean they've kind of turned it on its head a little bit by playing strip Monopoly in this instance, haven't they?
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was funny too because she was talking about like, oh, do you give up? He goes, I'm never going to give up. And then the next thing, like the door flings open and she goes, oh, I left the windows open. I got to go.
I know. And like she doesn't even put her clothes back on, if I remember rightly. She puts like a
she just puts like a raincoat.
Raincoat on. That's it. She puts a raincoat on and runs away. Oh my god.
Random Katharine Hepburn impression.
When I looked into that mirror, I knew I'd always be ugly. I said, Lizzie, you'll always be plain.
Oh my god.
Such a random thing to do.
I know. Yeah, it's all right.
But I guess it's raining outside, and that line's from The Rainmaker, so...
Oh, okay, nice.
There you go. Tying it all back in. Here's my favorite horror movie trope.
Why don't you stay here and try and get some sleep? I'll be right back.
I'll be right back.
Ooh. I'll be right back.
No, you won't.
Please don't go. In saying that, there was a lot of girls kind of saying, "Can I go with you?" In this,
it's true.
that happened more often than it actually probably should have. Generally speaking, the men kind of run away to kind of like investigate things.
Immediately die.
Immediately die with an arrow through the eye and then pinned to the wall.
So I guess in all fairness, that's about the third time he actually had to leave, and she didn't go with him that last time.
Yeah,
but it's the time he said, I'll be right back. So
yeah. Fair enough.
It's his own fault. Here's Betsy Palmer in all her glory.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her. Don't let her get away, Mommy. Don't let her live.
I won't, Jason. I won't.
Oh my god,
She's so good.
It's actually quite creepy. Even just listening to that then, it kind of, it gave me kind of like chills a bit. She's very effective. You can tell she's a skilled actress.
Yeah, for sure, right? It's so good.
I mean, she's a step above the rest of the guys, definitely. I mean, actually, I shouldn't say that. The rest of the counselors did the best they could with the material that was supplied and the direction they were given. But like, none of them, as we said, none of them went on to like anything, substantial except Kevin Bacon. But that's another story.
So I got one last clip, and it's music again, and this is from the end credits, and I couldn't help but think of Twin Peaks. Like, this is the music they put on the end credits. Doesn't that remind you of Twin Peaks?
Yeah, totally. It's Angelo Badalamenti or whatever his name is. Wow, there you go. I didn't even really think of that. Maybe he was listening to that. I love the Twin Peaks music. I think it's great. Yeah, I was actually listening to that soundtrack the other day. It was wonderful.
Awesome. So that's our clips.
Wow, that was good. I mean, I kind of enjoyed kind of listening to them like that and kind of being able to comment. It's something a bit new for us, isn't it?
Yeah. I thought it'd be, just something new and interesting to do.
Nice.
All right. So next week, we're talking about Friday the 13th Part 2. As you said, came out the very next year. They rushed it out.
I'm going to ask you a question, and you need to be honest with me, Corey, okay? Is this Police Academy all over again? Are they going to release one film a year for the next 8 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Straight up, yes.
Okay. For our long-time listeners, you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, I guess that's it for this episode. For more great podcasts from Golden Sparrow Media, you can head over to goldensparrowmedia.com/iTunes. You can come and join us on Facebook. We're at facebook.com/Rewatch Podcast. We're on the Twitters at Rewatch Pod. And of course, we appreciate your rate and reviews. It's very, very helpful. You can find us on your podcast app of choice.
And don't forget, you can find all the episodes on YouTube as well. So just go over to YouTube and you'll find us over there too.
We did decide, even though we moved over onto the network, we keep up with the YouTube. It's great. We've got some people over there. We get some, we get a lot of views on the YouTube.
Yeah, it kind of connects. People connect over there, so it's kind of like a nice platform to kind of just keep all the episodes, and it's quite useful.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me, Nathan.
No worries. Thank you.
Our inaugural movie discussion for GSM.
Yeah, I wonder how many times I'm going to shriek next week. Maybe our audience can vote.
That'd be great.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'll just say, until next time, we ain't gonna stand for any weirdness out here.
Dumb kids, know-it-alls, just like my niece, heads full of rocks.
Golden Spiral Media and the Rewatch Podcast are not associated with the copyright holders of these films, and no copyright infringement is intended.
They were making love while that young boy drowned.
The use of any and all copyrighted material is solely for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes, as provided in United States Code Title 17, aka Fair Use.
It's gonna take more than poking the ribs to put down this old dog.
Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com.
Cool, JJ. Parents really came through.
Copyright 2017, Golden Spiral Media.
You're a dead meat, slime bag.